Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hi, welcome to ThePrint Soft Cover, ThePrint's online venue to release select non-fiction books. Today, the book that we have, that we are going to launch is called The Disruptor, How Vishwanath Pratap Singh Shook India by senior journalist Debashish Mukerji. The book offers a detailed account of the rise and brief but eventful tenure of the late Vishwanath Pratap Singh, who was the Prime Minister of India from December 1989 to November 1990. Debashish Mukerji is a journalist with nearly 4 decades of experience, and Mr. Mukerji had previously worked with Hindustan Times, The Week and Business Today. He's an expert on Uttar Pradesh and national level politics. The book puts together detailed accounts of the biggest contribution of Singh's tenure on Indian politics, such as the adoption of the Mandal Commission report and attempts to curb corrupt practices in the private sector. Well, let's look at the cover of the book. I'm just going to unwrap it now, so just bear with me. This is the book. Yeah. So, well, let's start with our interview, sir. So the first question, what made you attempt this biography? Everyone would want to know that. Why VP Singh?
Well, I have been following UP politics and Indian politics, and I felt that VP Singh's impact, I mean, some people may wonder whether it is contribution or not, but I felt VP Singh's impact on Indian politics had not been properly delineated. It had not been properly appreciated. And so I thought I'd give this a shot, right from his birth to his death, really, basically. The book travels, and it particularly looks at the ways in which he, as the title puts it, shook India. There are at least three specific ways in which he did so, and I've tried to explain all of them. Yeah.
You also pointed out in the book, and I also felt that, VP Singh sort of ended up antagonizing both the Congress and the BJP. Is this one of the primary reasons that he's not been given the posthumous attention he deserves?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, I think so very much. Because first he fell out with Rajiv Gandhi, and then he took the help of the BJP to oust Rajiv Gandhi. But thereafter, the BJP's agenda and his soon began to completely were at cross purposes, because the BJP began harping upon Ayodhya, and he was totally against this kind of movement. So naturally, then he fell foul of the BJP. In fact, towards the end, he had become a little closer to the Congress, and he was implacably opposed to the BJP by the time he died. Yeah.
So you also mentioned that how Vishwanath Pratap Singh sort of permanently altered India's political landscape. What do we, mean by this, especially in the context of OBC reservation?
Yeah. Now, the OBC reservation, as you know, he enforced the Mandal Commission report, which calls for 27% reservation for the other backward classes. Now, since independence in North India, at least, and indeed in the central government services, there had been reservations only for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Right. There was no reservation for the OBCs. Whereas however, in South and West India, to a large extent, there were some state level reservations for OBCs too. Now, OBCs constitute this section that the kind of working class, they would not be untouchable. So we have to make a strong distinction between Dalits and OBC. They were the peasants and those whom I call service providers, like barbers and dhobies and iron workers and sort of that kind of stuff. So they were also discriminated to some extent over in past times, but not to the extent that the Dalits had been. And they had been more or less ignored in North India. So he enforced this Mandal Commission report, and that what impact it had on the bureaucracy is not very clear yet, because it has brought in many more people from these castes into the bureaucracy. But it had tremendous impact upon the political landscape in North India, because it made the OBCs, it organized the OBCs, it brought them together as a political force. And especially in UP and Bihar, where it destroyed the Congress kind of, because the Congress's support base used to be upper castes, scheduled castes, and Muslims, right? And they had not somehow moved the OBCs too much before. So when the OBCs organized and began to support the opposition to the Congress, the other sections also slowly sort of moved away from the Congress, and that led to in UP and Bihar, Congress becoming the weakest party among the leading parties.
But despite all of that, even the Samajwadi Party and the RJD, which obviously benefited from this move, even they seem to have not sort of acknowledged VP Singh's what he has done in the past.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. They have not. They have chosen not to do so, and because the two main leaders, Mulayam Singh Yadav and Lalu Yadav, I guess they want to focus attention on themselves.
But even today, if we see that the entire issue of OBC reservation in terms of caste-based census, that has become sort of the focus of the politics today, especially in the context of Uttar Pradesh elections, as well as for the BJP, it has become a major dilemma. So how do you see this? I mean, the entire the Mandal Kamandal politics, it's how it is like sort of spanning out.
Yeah, today again, this caste census is a very big issue. And there are sections which are supporting it and opposing it. And the main reason for that is they are not very sure of how large the OBC population might turn out to be, or the Dalit population might turn out to be. And they fear that this may affect the reservation pattern. Because the reservation pattern is based on an old judgment that was passed in long back. It was the Balaji versus the state of Mysore, I think it was in the 1950s, which said that it should not be more than 50% of any kind of reservation. That has been reached in some places, but that basically still remains. And the logic of that is that the exception should not overwhelm the rule, right? The rule is that there should be no discrimination in employment and so forth. There are relevant articles in the Constitution to that effect. But at the same time, the Constitution allowed that some special groups which have been historically disadvantaged could be given special provisions. So there is a fear that if you find that the OBCs or the Dalits or both are much more numerous than than they were supposed to be, than they were at independence, then there may be a demand that this 50% ceiling be removed, and even more reservation granted to these groups. So in a way, the upper caste feel that for practicing family planning, they are being penalized. So that may be that is the unspoken fear. And that is why people are opposed to caste census. Yes.
The book is quite well researched, I must say, and has some very interesting anecdote, especially the face-off between VP Singh and Rajiv Gandhi, as well as Amitabh Bachchan. The book also details, the rivalry with Amitabh Bachchan, but something that he's also denied, over a period of time. So could you just elaborate a bit on it for our viewers?
Yeah, the problem with Amitabh Bachchan arose because they were both from Allahabad. And that in any senior leader, at least on his home turf, doesn't want rivals. So both Vishwanath Pratap Singh and Amitabh felt that way. But as it happened, Vishwanath Pratap Singh was the finance minister, and Amitabh was Amitabh. He had a following and a popularity that went beyond just the party or being the MP from there. So inevitably there was rivalry between them and sort of a kind of hidden, concealed kind of hostility between the two. But then the problem arose when VP Singh began investigating, trying to clean up corporate corruption in a big way.
Right.
Now, there is no proof that he ever went after Amitabh Bachchan or the film industry or film actors or anything like that. But then impression gained ground because something very strange happened, which I've discussed in the book. And that was that Amitabh's brother chose to shift from Bombay or Mumbai to Switzerland. He suddenly sort of upped and left. So that raised all kinds of speculation. And at the same time, VP Singh was trying to find out about so-called dubious overseas dealings of Reliance Industries. He claimed there was some Benami stuff, foreign money flowing in or whatever. So he said he contacted his department rather contacted a detective agency abroad and got them to investigate Reliance Industries. Now, while that was going on, some unknown guy turned up at Amitabh Bachchan, that is Amitabh Bachchan's brother's house, said he was from the same detective agency and began to question him about his finances. So that whereas in fact, these people, both this Fairfax, the detective agency and VP Singh and his department, because people don't do it themselves. No? Obviously, it's the officers who do it. They've all, sort of scrupulously denied that they ever had questioned Amitabh Bachchan or rather his brother or any such thing. But that really got Rajiv Gandhi very worked up that he was trying to get some dirt on Amitabh and by association on Rajiv himself. That in the course of his cleanup drive, he was trying to besmirch the very person who had put him in charge. So that led to the big misunderstanding, really.
Well, his tenure was, sorry, please complete it.
Yeah, and it led to VP Singh being thrown out. In fact, he was first shifted to the defense ministry, and there was a kind of campaign of calumny against him, saying that he was a CIA guy and this particular detective agency was connected to CIA and he was going to part with the country's secrets and all that, which was completely untrue. And VP Singh got so angry about it that he started investigating defense deals. And then he found that HDW deal and so forth and so on and so forth.
Well, you also, talk about the Raid Raj. His tenure was also termed as Raid Raj when he was the finance minister. The number of raids that were conducted, especially the Dhirubhai Ambani. At the same time, he ordered investigation into the defense deals. So, which, as you pointed out, it cost him his job. So, how do you see that? Do you think he was acting independently, or was it something that he felt that it would have affected his tenure? Why did he go about it?
See, when Rajiv Gandhi first came to power in 1985, that was his major plank, or rather, that was he laid great emphasis on fighting corruption.
Right.
And when he made VP Singh the finance minister, he gave him that brief also that corruption has to be ruthlessly curbed. So VP Singh went about doing it, and you can say that VP Singh overdid it. Rajiv Gandhi also did it in the beginning. He was, especially in politics, he would, while nominating candidates for, by assembly elections or other elections, his first emphasis was on, does he have a clean image? Is there any kind of criminal charge against him? And in that case, he's out. At least in the beginning. But there are contradictions in this now, because many of much of the slush funds that companies may be raising, it goes to fund elections. You see, so they are all connected. And often, if you, as for criminals, if you eliminate all the criminals, the nice guys don't win. Ultimately, you've got to win the election, right? So you have to strike some kind of balance, So Rajiv Gandhi slowly realized that in about a year and a half. But VP Singh was not troubled by having to win elections, right? So he continued in that vein. And the kind of people he sort of targeted were absolute top people, as I've said in the book, Bajaj Auto and Tata's Voltas and Lipton Tea of Hindustan Unilever and Kirloskar, which was very big at the time. And this Janet Thapar. So all this raised a big furor, and there was turmoil in the country over it. But that did not really affect VP Singh. The investigation that really got him was the one into Reliance. Somehow Reliance, Dhirubhai Ambani convinced Rajiv Gandhi that VP Singh was trying to kind of overshadow him, or whatever it was. I mean, it's not really clear how he convinced Rajiv Gandhi, but Rajiv Gandhi completely changed his attitude after that happened, and he became very suspicious of VP Singh. So then he moved VP Singh out of the finance ministry and into the defense ministry. And there he started investing, but he still wouldn't give up. And he and he was annoyed about this being shifted out, and more so because they were making these allegations that he had teamed up with some foreign agencies and all that. So he went into investigating defense deals. And then he found there was some illegal commission had been paid. And Rajiv was furious about that too. And he found himself out of the party. That's how it happened.
One of the interesting things that I found in the book is, the relationship between VP Singh and Indira Gandhi, and how, you have talked about it. At a time when most deserted her, he decided to stick to her. And there are many instances that you point out in terms of loyalty. How do you see the relationship between the two?
See, VP Singh felt that but for Indira Gandhi, he would have had no political career. Right, because when he first tried to become an MLA, and then he started at a fairly late age, at 37 or so, he didn't get much patta from many of the Congress people, in UP that he was trying. He was not given much attention. He made the rounds of various senior leaders and all that. But luckily, from his brother was already an MP.
Right.
His brother, Amitabh Singh. And his brother not only knew Indira Gandhi, but he had worked closely with Indira Gandhi on foreign policy issues. And when she had that big split in the Congress later, he was reasonably close to Indira Gandhi. So he took VP Singh along, and they met Indira Gandhi. And Indira Gandhi didn't say anything at the time, but she decided to push for him, because she was also at the time trying to establish her own sort of ground, her own position in the party, which the senior leaders didn't want. Obviously, they wanted to control her actions and her decisions. So VP Singh, because of that, became completely loyal. So right up to the end, and Indira Gandhi's actions over the next 15 years were very controversial.
Yes, I was about to ask about the emergency. I mean, how did he view that?
He felt no, he still should support her. And he continued to do so even through the emergency and all that. Yes.
But you do point out in the book that his views about, how it was all dealt with in terms of that, the political prisoners should have been released earlier.
He inwardly feel that, he did, as many others also probably in the Congress, felt that this is too much, that this is absolutely, this is very wrong, whatever is happening. But he said it in a muted way to Indira Gandhi when he said this. There was this big family planning drive during which a lot of people were, there were many excesses of that family planning drive. So he had pointed out that was moving people against the Congress and all that. There were sentiments were going against the Congress, and generally also this locking up your opponents. I mean, this is ridiculous. So so it went. So that was the scenario basically.
The book also credits Mr. Singh for sort of bringing together a divided opposition and, bringing in an era of coalition government. I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong. How do you see that? How do you define it?
Before VP Singh came on the scene, ever since after the Janta experiment had fizzled out, the parties were completely separate. The Janta Party, etc. So as a result, and they had their differing ideologies, and they had broken up even further. They had become even more fragmented than they were before. And while they were all talking about opposition unity, they never got anywhere close to it. But VP Singh, that was his, the achievement basically, that once he was thrown out of the Congress, he formed a small this thing, but his own Jan Morcha. But that was very small. You can't win in a day. You have the party you have to build up over a period of time. But he got all the central parties together, those with the kind of centrist ideologies, and he even managed to get the BJP on one side and the communists on the other, all together, and generally unite all the parties against the Congress. Because Congress in every election till then, and in fact even subsequently, they never got 50% plus of the votes. It was always in the 40s.
Right.
So that if you combine all the others against the Congress will lose. But nobody was able to do that before because of their disparate ideologies and also their sort of fractious temperaments both together. But this, at least for a brief while, VP Singh managed to do so, and does win the 1989 election.
The book also throws interesting anecdotes, especially about Congress culture, the entire sycophancy. And how did Singh react to all of this,
Well, what he has said that he is in his interviews given towards the end of his life, that singing praises of the leader is part of Congress culture.
Yes.
And I also did it. But that doesn't mean I would do anything wrong that I was asked to do. That was his response. So, yeah, there was a cultural sycophancy. Now it's much less, but during Indira's later phase and also under Rajiv Gandhi, it was fairly nauseating. Yes, it was there.
And the book also talks about specific how VP Singh was sort of instrumental in, let's say, the Mandal the commission. At the same time, you also talk about that India could have gone nuclear, but VP Singh decided not to.
Yeah, that was a time. That has been said about every Prime Minister took that very sort of conscious decision not to go nuclear until, of course, Vajpayee did so in BJP came to power and they did it in 1998. And VP Singh's reason for, because of our scientists at Bhabha Atomic Research and all that, they were ready. They were from the late 70s also, I think they've been ready, or early 80s. But VP Singh said, one, that it will attract sanctions, and that will affect our country economically. Secondly, we were having problems with Pakistan again, and
Right.
there was even talk of a Pakistan invasion over Kashmir. So he said, again, if we do this now, it will incline the West and the major powers towards Pakistan. So it would be a foolish thing to do. He called it a self-goal. And I'm told subsequently, even Narasimha Rao decided not to do it. And I think even Deve Gowda decided not to do it. So they could all have done it.
You also mentioned how a defamatory campaign was, launched against VP Singh by the Congress. Why did that happen? How did he deal with it?
So that was in the context of that Amitabh Bachchan affair. After that, they went absolutely ballistic against him at that time. When Rajiv Gandhi got the impression that VP Singh was trying to upstage him. He had made him finance minister and told him to clean up corporate India, but that doesn't mean he should go after him and his friends. Which in fact VP Singh was not doing. At least there is no evidence to that effect that I found. VP Singh was pursuing Reliance, and Reliance managed to give that impression that that he was also targeting people close to Raji and trying to find out things about them. So that is what led to that the campaign against VP Singh, and it sort of changed history. I'm surprised that a single a private company was able to change Indian history. But yeah, that is what happened. And because if VP Singh had not left the Congress, then there's no way in 1989 that Rajiv Gandhi would have lost or the Congress would have lost. Because if he had not brought all the opposition parties together in the way he did, then it would not have happened. Even otherwise, the Congress did reasonably well, especially in South India. So, so that is what happened. Yes, they launched this campaign against him, and he managed to sort of overthrow the Congress. Yeah.
Just the last few questions. You also talk about that, there were a number of steps that were initiated by the VP Singh government, but they were completed and later, claimed by later governments, including the RTI Act. Apart from that, any other that you would like to mention?
Or this this one rank one pension scheme.
Okay.
There were a number of such things that he mainly it was this RTI and Manrega, which he both tried very hard to bring. But with RTI, what happened was that people were very uncomfortable with RTI, including bureaucrats and other political parties. So the political parties he somehow convinced, but the bureaucrats when they gave him the draft of the RTI Act, he said this would conceal rather than reveal anything. He was unhappy with the act. It was intended to be a kind of whitewash. So he gave it back to them and said, no, you rewrite this completely. And then his government fell. With Manrega, what happened was that the states objected. At the beginning, there was talk of sharing. Now, Manrega means a lot of expense, once you give statutory employment guarantee. So the state says, no, we don't have any money. Center should pay all of it. He said, no, wait. I mean, that's too much. Let's make it 75-25 or whatever. That discussion was going on basically. And then his government fell. Same thing with Orof. Again, the bureaucrats said that if you're giving it to the defense people, one rank, one pension, we should have it also. Right. The civil servants should also, the IAS people should also get it. So amidst all that, it fell. Then electoral reforms, he set up a committee to improve, to bring in electoral reforms, and especially this business of funding, which even today is a big gray area. But again, nothing came of it in the end. The only thing he managed was this MRP business. Everything you buy and any package you buy has an MRP. That came in VP Singh's time. Yeah.
Please continue.
No, and also for the slum dwellers of Delhi, but only Delhi. So he did a fair bit for them also.
You also mentioned how, when he started off campaigning as an MLA, he would talk about that, if you want me to transfer someone, if you want me to do this work or that work, I will not be able to do it. Don't vote for me. Do you think in today's time he would have been a misfit? Because in today's time, a politician is ready to do everything.
Yeah. In fact, even then, most of them were ready. And yes, that is what happens. If you tell influential people, even beforehand, that this sort of thing I can't do, well, they'll go and vote for your opponent. And it's a big dilemma because ultimately you have to win, to remain relevant. To lose the election, nobody's going to say that, you were very principled and then you lost the election. Once you lost, you're forgotten. So it was very brave of him to do that. Yes, definitely. To say that I want no transfers, no interference in criminal cases, no trying to influence the judiciary, no trying to get you licenses for selling this or that. Yeah, he tried it. At least in the beginning of his career, he was definitely tried it. Yeah.
And the book also gives a detailed personal account of his life, and how difficult was it to sort of research and get not only his family but people from the Congress, from other parties. How did you go about it?
And see, the foundation is this interview that he gave, which remained untouched all these years, to the Nehru Library.
Right.
library. It is in their oral history section. So that is a very detailed account of his life. So that was a kind of starting point from start to finish. He had a very strange childhood, as you may have.
Yes, I read
I mean, we think that people in these, from these wealthy zamindar families have it all good, but he had a very bad time because he was
adopted,
given in adoption and all that. Yeah. So my starting point was that, and then I talked to all the survivors, and then of course newspaper and magazine archives. So putting it together was fun, but it took some time. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but mainly because I felt that this guy had done something substantial, which was not being acknowledged, and the issues that he dealt with, they are very relevant today. I mean, corruption. Come on, corruption is key. And including corruption in defense deals. Then, secondly, communalism, of course. I mean, it's still very much today. Babri Masjid it started in his time, and finally Babri Masjid has been dissolved, but Hindu-Muslim differences in India are still so acute, and there's so much problem with that. And third is caste disparity.
Right.
All the three main things that he dealt with are still very relevant today. So all that, I thought I should sort of try and resurrect this guy and tell people how he, what he did, and so on. Yeah.
So thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your time and good luck with the book. I really enjoyed reading it. Thank you so much for giving us time.
Thank you, Neelam. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir.